China is stepping up in the Pacific, the US is stepping up.
Strategically, this is a very important space. America pulled its influence out of the region, and that created a vacuum.
The biggest threat in the Pacific comes from an increasingly aggressive China.
It's about who controls the trade lanes and the movement of oil and goods in the Pacific.
They say it's a balance of power, but if it falls, what will happen? War.
The critical thing for these Pacific Island states is to avoid being collateral damage.
China is not a threat. China is opportunity.
There's no good guys. You look at France, you look at America, everyone's got a legacy.
You can see here, park, the children can play, see the parks. It's not really the park for the children. Moi, le combat que je mène, c'est la politique ou l'Indo-Pacifique ou entre les États-Unis, la Chine et la France. Pour l'instant, c'est loin. C'est le domaine politique, c'est l'histoire de nos politiques. Mais nous, soucions-nous d'abord de comment on va remettre de l'emploi pour notre jeunesse dans nos quartiers.
New Caledonia is strategically important to France in the Pacific region. So France very much wants to retain that geopolitical influence in the South Pacific in order to maintain a French presence in the region to counter China's influence.
On est colonisé depuis 1853. Donc, il y a eu des révoltes. Nos arrière-grands-pères, nos papas ont toujours cherché à se révolter contre cette colonisation. Tu dis que la France est un pays de droits de l'homme. Tu soi-disant dire à l'ONU que la colonisation est un crime contre l'humanité. Alors que tu es un colonisateur. On continue à travailler sur quelqu'un qui colonise, qui fait de la répression militaire. It's not the really place like Kanak people have to live, because we need outside to cultivate, to build up the food. La vie, elle est très difficile dans la cité. Les familles ont du mal à sortir la tête de l'eau, avec des loyers excessifs, des prix de denrées dans les magasins qui sont devenus très chers et des revenus très très bas.
New Caledonia is one of the few of these islands that is still a dependency of a European power. The ability to chart your own independence or your own future should be something that all peoples can embrace. Now, for New Caledonia, their future is set out via Paris, not directly in Noumea.
On essaye toujours de s'en sortir, d'aller chercher notre liberté pour être libre demain de décider pour notre pays.
Since the Kanak awakening in the late 1960s, they have fought for their independence from France. The unrest and the dissatisfaction with the independence process had gone back many, many years. The riots of May 13th, 2024, they were triggered by Emmanuel Macron's unilateral decision to change the electoral roll.
What we saw was the national government of France trying to railroad through a very significant change to the way voting is conducted in New Caledonia. This was considered very problematic by the Kanaki people because they felt that it would dilute their vote, which then led to the civil disorder that we saw.
Donc ça tombe, et la nuit du 13 mai, ici même à Montravel, les gens s'étaient rassemblés, a commencé en fait des échauffourées avec les forces de l'ordre qui étaient là. La tension était au maximum. C'est très très dur avec les axes routiers bloqués, des ripostes avec les forces de l'ordre, donc des personnes ont été blessées et des morts.
On a entendu le premier coup de feu. Ce soir-là, comme il y avait des jeunes qui essayaient d'aller vers cette maison-là, et du coup, ils ont tiré. Ensuite, tous les jeunes se sont sauvés, et c'était au deuxième coup de feu. On était 3. Le premier a sauté, je me suis écarté, et lui, il a pris la balle, on l'a emmené au Medipol. C'est au cours de route qu'il commençait à lâcher, et il est décédé au Medipol.
Les assassinats ce matin se sont passés sur des terres coutumières, où il y a des chefferies, des clans et des familles.
L'État français, celui de M. Macron, se fout complètement de l'état du peuple kanak ici. Marche sur les droits humains et ne respecte pas le peuple kanak.
Qu'on n'est pas des animaux, en fait. On est des êtres humains. On n'est pas d'accord avec le pouvoir politique en place, mais nos vies valent aussi autant que vos vies.
800 businesses were looted or destroyed. 20,000 people are out of jobs. The destruction has been estimated at 2.2 billion euros. 13 people died, 11 Kanaks and 2 gendarmes. The UN itself has condemned the severity of the response to the riots. They had 7,000 troops on the ground. That's an unprecedented amount of troops. The response by France was very, very strong.
Après les émeutes de mai, beaucoup de personnes ont perdu leur emploi. Et ce qui impacte beaucoup les familles, c'est le loyer. Donc, le gel du loyer, ça serait quelque chose d'important pour les familles. Parce que demain, si on perd notre loyer, ça veut dire que toute la population-là pourra se retrouver demain à la rue.
My apartment is in a building, a small building over there, in 6th flat, which we can see green color and gray color. This is my new home. 4 months ago, I decided to come here because I'm no more working. Noumea is separated in 2 pieces, Noumea North and Noumea South. Every poor people stay in Noumea North and Noumea South. Many white people stay there. You can find big house with swimming pool, with a garage for 2 or 3 cars. So every morning when I come out there, I put that like this. Before I working at Meridian Hotel, I'm the manager from the home service. And then, because struggle happened, my general manager say me, maybe your contract is stopped because no more tourists come in Noumea, only the French army. What happened to me, it's not a special thing in Noumea. The life is difficult, yes. Whatever you do, share with everybody. Because when you can share with somebody, you have some good thing coming back with you. Sorry, my throat is dry. I can speak very well. I have to follow my people. It's very important for me. So if I crying like a baby, but it's very strong for me to say.
On aurait pu être riche si on était Si les choses avaient été bien cadrées dès le départ, dans les années où l'exploitation minière et tout ça, et pourquoi nous, la population, n'en a pas bénéficié depuis le nombre d'années que la France a exploité toutes nos richesses.
The reason France reacted so strongly to the riots is they want to keep New Caledonia. They want to protect the nickel mining interests there. It's important to note China is slowly ingratiating itself into the New Caledonian economy, particularly in nickel. In 2011, 6.9% of exports from New Caledonia Kanaki went to China. In 2022, 63% went to China. So this is something that concerns France. France needs to reconsider how it reacts in future if there are any more uprisings, because this is not going to help.
When you're seeing a traditional colonial power not being as good as it should be in trying to hear the voice of the people, it means that other countries look more beneficially on other outsiders. But the other outsiders will have their own interests as well. They're not coming in like the 7th Cavalry to save the day.
We like to see the stability and order out there. China attach great importance to make sure if there's any assistance China can provide or any kind of thing China can do, we'll be love to participate. And we also, first of all, the paramount importance, show our respect to the sovereignty and independence of the host countries.
China is going to continue to ingratiate itself with New Caledonians until it reaches its independence.
It shouldn't be about whether the French want to have influence or whether the Chinese want to have influence. It's what's good for the Pacific people, but everyone's just trying to manipulate the situation to how they can get something out of it.
Avant de discuter de l'Indo-Pacifique, de les États-Unis, de la Chine et puis tout ça, soucions-nous d'abord de ce qui se passe dans nos quartiers, dans nos tribus, parce que c'est ça qui fait un pays de demain. Mais si on se soucie de l'économie, de reconstruire de ceci, de cela, de l'Indo-Pacifique, mais si notre population vit toujours dans une misère, eh bien on retrouvera les fumées noires sur notre route. Hein.
There's a very strong colonial legacy in the Pacific. I think a number of countries have exploited the Pacific. And so the Americans, the French, and the British all have a legacy.
Thus, in the far Pacific, on islands the Japanese had early seized at so little cost, United States Marines delivered our first solid punch.
The Pacific, one of the two main theaters of the Second World War, the first being the European theater against Nazi Germany.
The Marines had gained their first objective.
And the second being the Pacific War against a militarist Japan. But what many people don't realize is that the scale of the Pacific War was much larger than that of Europe. It shaped the course of World War II in the Pacific.
The Marines will continue fighting and slugging island by island, until they win at last to the farthest islands of all.
It's home, it's paradise. Welcome. Welcome to Santo, welcome to Vanuatu. There's so much to do out here. I'd like to work with tourists, experiencing different cultures, dealing with different people every day. Where we are is $1 million Point, Vanuatu. $1 million Point is named after the millions of dollars that have been spent on the machineries or the equipments that have been dumped in the water after the war. My family owns the land. This is American stuff. Then the aircraft tank. You see here, The glasses, metals everywhere. They used to say there's a dump site there. Rubbish everywhere.
Vanuatu, it was never attacked in the Second World War, but the United States selected Vanuatu as its starting point. So very quickly, well over 100,000 Americans arrived on the island, along with engineers, which meant putting in everything that the United States would need to sustain the offense into the Solomons.
Coke bottles, so they've been dumped by the Americans. So this is the glasses that you can find on the land, even on the sea. That was 1945 when the war finished. So the Americans decided to leave Vanuatu. They decided to dump everything.
As they did on many islands, they either just drove the vehicles and equipment into the sea or just abandoned it.
No, it's not rocks. It's all metals. The pollution, the fuel, the oil, so it's been poisoned. The people, they're not allowed to take any fish or anything out of the water because they're poisoned. The impact was a threat to the indigenous people on the surrounding areas.
21st century, there's a legal duty. 21st century, you have a war, you have to clean up what you've got. 20th century, no legal obligation. And if it's a rubbish dump which can explode, that does not make good faith relations. In fact, that makes you almost toxic to the countries that leave the mess behind.
After dumping everything, then they never come back to say, can we do something or can we compensate anything? They never come back for that.
It's a lesson that I think we all need to remember. It is a dangerous thing when superpowers are playing these games again. Who's going to get caught in the crossfire again? Sometimes I think about it, and I think, yeah, what if it happened again? What's going to happen? I think the devastation will be worse.
They say history repeats itself. I get this weird feeling. I mean, it's not a nice feeling, but, you know, it's building up to something similar.
I am very concerned about the Chinese Communist Party. In 2019, I was elected to be a provincial candidate. And from that time, they elected me to be the premier. Malaita province is one of the most populated provinces of this country. Employment is one of the very big issues here. Most students, when they leave school, they find it really difficult to get a job.
What you've got often is a situation where the countries in the Pacific, they're not just poor, they're very poor, and that makes them beholden to whichever country comes in and tries to utilize them for whatever purposes that they want.
The Chinese Communist Party, they're trying to take over Solomon Islands because most of the national members here have been influenced already by the Chinese people. So politically, they're taking over Solomon Islands. In my view, our resources is the target, like forestry, fisheries, and mining. Those are their interests here. They're not here to help us in any way.
Australian peacekeepers have arrived in the Solomon Islands to help its government respond to protests and riots. The latest unrest was sparked by economic problems and an unpopular decision by the Prime Minister to move closer to China.
Previously, Solomon Islands partners have been your kind of traditional Western liberal democracy countries.
Plumes of smoke fill the sky as hundreds hake to the streets of Honiara. Anti-government protesters marched in the east of the capital and in Chinatown.
They got angry. A lot of them were very young people. And they came through Chinatown here and they started to loot and burn the shops here. So Chinatown was basically totally wiped out.
There are so many things that leads up to that burning down. There are other things that the government promised and signed documents to do to the people of Malaita province, like to give them state government. This issue at the moment is quite sensitive for me. The government still think that I am the initiator of that the whole riot at Chinatown. I'm just saying something good for the government to do for its people. That's all I'm advocating for, not for riot.
China has signed a cooperation agreement with the Solomon Islands, one that Western governments believe could bring Chinese warships uncomfortably close to Australia's shores. News of the agreement sent shockwaves around the world. The U.S. warned against it, saying it could expand the reach of China's military.
Basically, it allowed Solomon Islands to call on China for military or police assistance, and that they would be allowed into the country, and also that they would be able to travel into our waters, the naval boats.
The most serious, most intense aspect of this cooperation is in building new military bases. So we know that China seems to have at least a quasi-military base in Solomons already, and this is extremely alarming to the U.S., Australia, New Zealand bloc. It's seen as a kind of a new Chinese intrusion.
There is no any kind of a hidden article or agenda for that. This is absolute nonsense. This is American way to think of that. America is good at building military bases. You know how many American military bases all over the world? Over 800. Even Asia Pacific, over 300 or 400. China has strengthened its collaboration with the Pacific Island countries for sure. China respect their sovereignty and their independence.
There's a bigger picture here I think for China especially. It's about world domination, and that's what it is. When you flip the coin, you see another country like the US, they're really waking up to the fact that China has come on in a strong way. But at the end of the day, you know, when you give something, you expect something. And that's the principle, and that's what's happening. That's what we're seeing.
The Chinese haven't done anything in the Pacific, so to speak. The U.S. legacy in the Pacific is not a very nice one. Look around the Pacific. Look at what's happened in Marshalls. They test their nuclear bombs there and they leave a mess.
A for atom, B for bomb. This is man's lofty monument to death and destruction.
People from Rongelap Atoll were forcibly enlisted into this top secret project so that they could test, you know, the effects of nuclear radiation.
I always think about the amount of Marshallese that were impacted by nuclear testing. So we know that the U.S. Navy has no problem devastating 90,000 people.
People, you know, want the restoration of their dignity by having the United States admit that there was a wrong committed.
Australia is set to buy at least 3 US-manufactured nuclear submarines amid growing concern around China's influence in the Indo-Pacific region.
The plan will take decades to complete. The defense alliance, called AUKUS, has already begun, with the first of hundreds of Australians embedding in US and UK submarine building programs.
A nuclear-powered submarine has the capacity to stay under the ocean and be much more silent than many other models, such as diesel models. So in terms of a military platform, they are quite attractive.
You're bringing a nuclear sub into the Pacific. I mean, that's crazy. We've always agreed we didn't want nuclear on this side of the world. I mean, that's so risky. Anything could happen.
China and the United States are both nuclear-armed powers. China has more than enough devices to devastate large parts of the United States, and the United States certainly has enough. And the end product of this might be the end of human civilization.
Whether we are concerned about the Pacific in ethical terms or social terms or cultural terms, we need to be concerned about trying to make sure it's a place for peace. We need to demilitarize, we need to cooperate, we need to reduce risk for the good, not just of the people of the Pacific, but for all of us.